Hi, my name is Alyssa Morales, and I believe teachers should always encourage their students to learn the way they learn best, whether that's hands-on or visual or auditory. In my classroom, I want to set up centers that cater the lesson towards those, especially if I'm working with visual learners. I want to make sure that I make a majority of my lesson plan visual, or that I put them in a center that's catered towards teaching that lesson visually. Or if I have an auditory group of learners, I want to make sure I'm putting them in a group where they can learn the lesson in an auditory way or kinesthetic too. I want to make sure I cater to their needs in that way. The teacher should always be a model of good behavior and have good morals. I think collaborating with general education as well as special education will help with student success, but I also think it's important to collaborate with the parents and, check in with the student, because you want to make sure that they're understanding it. You want to have a good teacher-student relationship. I think it's really important to be in consistent contact with parents and students, and include students in their education, because it is their education after all, and they should have a say, or not a say, but they should have a say in how they're learning what they have to learn, because we don't know what works best for them if we never ask them. I'm determined to make sure all of my students are treated fairly, which I think is something very important that I take into my first year of teaching. But I think my only flaw is that I do love my kids, and I want to do anything and everything for them and help them as much as I can. But I have to realize when I need to take that step back, because there's only so far I can go as a teacher. And I think that's probably one of my biggest flaws. But I am definitely an activist for my children. I want to make sure that they're treated fairly and that they believe in themselves. Because if a child doesn't believe in themselves and they're labeled as the stupid kid or, the dumb one, then they start to take on that. And I want to make sure that they're able to be strong enough to block all of that out and know that it's okay that their brain works differently, and that everyone's brain works differently, and it just takes them a little longer to get there, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And what effect could personal bias have on expectations as a teacher for their students? I think a lot of this comes from personal bias with working at I worked at a higher end school, and then I worked at a school that's the complete opposite. Everyone there is really low economically. And I think that at the higher school, there were more parent involvement, and they wanted all the resources for their kid, and they were educated on what was out there. And I think the teachers were more involved with the education because the parents wanted them to be, and the parents were super involved. And I think when a child comes from higher income housing, the teacher expects more from them than a child with lower income. So there's kind of a bias, and it's not always fair. Where when I worked at the lower income, parents would have to reschedule IEP meetings because they're working 3 jobs. The kids end up going to the Boys and Girls Club after school, or they walk home because their mom's not there. And those kids weren't getting as many of the resources as the kids that were from the higher income school, and there wasn't much expected out of them. It's working at one with the higher end. They always did work every day. They tracked what they did. They sent logs home. Where in the lower income school, it was they sometimes fill out coloring pages, crossword puzzles, stuff like that. So I think that there's a huge bias there in the expectations for not only the teachers were not expected to do much, neither were the students or parents. So yeah, that's my thing.